Welcome to Excel magic trick number 1471. Hey, just as we've done in the last two videos, we're going to create a report to add daily rainfalls from some start time to the same start time the next day. Now, in Excel magic trick 1469, we saw how to do it with a helper column and pivot table. 1470, we saw how to do it with Power Query. But in this video, we want to see how to do it with formulas, and in particular, a couple of array formulas. Now, here's 1, 2, 3, 4 different formulas. This is going to count unique numbers. These two formulas will extract the unique dates, and the two different formulas will work off different assumptions about our raw data. And then there's the formula for adding the rain totals for each date. And there's what the top part of our finished report will look like. Now, as we compare these three methods, pivot table and helper column are the easiest. Power Query allows us to bring in external data and create the report that way. And array formulas will be the most automatic of all of the methods, meaning when we change the raw data or the start time, the report will instantly update. But, of course, when we're doing formulas, especially array formulas, they get pretty complicated. That's why we're super glad we have pivot tables and Power Query. All right, let's go over to 1471. Here's our data set. We have date and time. We have rain totals. Now, I'm going to click in the top cell and control down arrow. I actually only added 260 rows of data. Later, we'll add all the extra data. And the reason why is I want to show you each step of the array formula and how it's calculating. And that's much easier to do when we have a small data set. Control Home. All right. Just like we talked about in the last couple of videos, this is a date and a time. If I go to Home, Number, click the dropdown and apply our eraser for number formatting, which is the general number formatting. Dates are number of days since December 31st, 1899, and time is a proportion of a 24-hour day. Control Z. So that means since we're dealing with dates and times, we're going to have to be aware of that when we create our formulas, which are going to be dealing with the underlying serial number for date and decimal serial number for time. I've also converted each one of these to Excel tables using Insert Table or Control T. And very importantly, Table Tools Design Properties. The name of that table is Rainfall, and the name of this table is Hour. Now, our first task is to create our time equivalent. 5 divided by 24 would give us the time equivalent. So I'm going to say equal sign, use my left arrow. And notice it has the field name in square brackets. This is a one-row table, so it lists just the field name. And then I divide it by 24. When I hit Enter, there's the time equivalent. As I change this, that time equivalent will adjust. Now we need to count unique number of days. Then we can extract the number of days and add the rain total for each day. Now when we're creating unique count formulas, they can be very complicated. In fact, I wrote a whole book called Control-Shift-Enter Mastering Excel Array Formulas that has lots of unique count formulas. But luckily, we have numbers. And there's a relatively easy set of functions we can use, the frequency function and the sum function. But we first need to reference this column. And we need to be aware that for counting unique number of days, if I'm adjusting the start of the day by 5 hours, that means 8/1 up to 4/30. All of these days actually have to be 7/31/2017. So I'm going to start off my formula for counting unique dates in that column by referencing the entire column. And this is an Excel table, so I can simply hover my cursor above the field name, and with my black cursor, I click, and it highlights the whole column. Table formula nomenclature will always list the table name and then the column name in square brackets. Now, that's not going to work because, again, the first couple ones really need to be the previous day. So I'm going to have to subtract from that entire column the time equivalent. That means it will move back the date time exactly 5 hours. Now, that's our first array calculation here because that is an entire column with lots of values. This happens to be a single value. And notice over here when we were inside the table, it referred to just the column. But now that we're outside that table, we have to list properly the table name and the field name. But it's an array calculation because every single number in this column, which is an array of items, will subtract that single number. If I were to click at the end and hit the F9 key to evaluate, you can see up here in the formula bar, 42947, that's actually 7/31/2017. The decimal part is the time. Down here we get to 42948, that's 8/1. But all of those are the date times, and I really want just the integer part, just the day part. So no problem. I'm going to come over here, Control-Z. I'm going to use the int function. It will take just the integer part of each of those day time values. Close parentheses. And if I F9, you can clearly see now we have a lot of repeats for 7/31/2017, and then a lot of repeats for 8/1, and so on. Now, from this list, I need to count the unique integers. Control-Z. Now, we're going to use this a few times in our formula, so I'm going to very carefully copy it. Now, again, I said because these are numbers, it's much easier to count unique items. By the way, it's much easier if we were in DAX, meaning Power Pivot or Power BI Desktop. They have a unique count formula. In Power Query, it's pretty easy also. But in an Excel formulas, it gets pretty crazy. Now, the function we get to use for counting unique numbers is the frequency function. So I'm going to enter frequency. Now, the data array argument is all of the potential items that you want to count or calculate the frequency for. Now, what we normally do, I'm going to click at the end, is type a comma. And for bins array, we give it the upper limits, like 10, 20, 30, 40. And then frequency counts for each one of the bins, 10 up to 20, 20 up to 30, and so on. But the trick for unique counting of numbers and frequency is you repeat exactly the same thing that's in the data array in the bins. So I'm going to Control-V. That way it has as an upper limit every single one of the numbers from the data array. Not only that, but because there's lots of duplicates, bins array in the frequency function is programmed to totally ignore duplicate bins. So watch what happens when I close parentheses and use the F9 key. It totally only looks at the very first repeat in bins and counts exactly how many there are. So there are 10 7/31/2017. There are 48 8/1/2017, and so on. All the way to the last one, which is 8/6. There's exactly 9. Now notice that the fact that the frequency function avoids duplicate bins means we only count in the very first occurrence. Remember, those were integer dates in that range right there. They were all the same date, but because there's 10 of them, the first bin caught and counted 10. Now, there's two uses for this resultant array of zeros and counts for that unique date. The first one is if we count numbers greater than 0, then we have our counting formula, how many unique dates there are. The second use for this is we will actually use this same formula element down in our formula to extract unique dates, because this also tells us the position in the array of integer dates where the first unique integer date occurs. So when we copy this and use it down in our formula, it will tell us, yeah, one of the dates we need for our unique list is in the first position. The next date we need for our unique list is in the 11th position. And then I think this is like 59, 107, and so on. Now I'm going to Control-Z, Now, there's two ways that we can figure out which numbers are greater than or equal to 0. And I'm going to show you both. The first one is simply to ask a logical test with a comparative operator. Greater than, how many of you in this resultant array are greater than 0? If I hit the F9 key, I get a bunch of trues and falses. Now I want to convert the trues and falses to ones and zeros. Control Z. You can do that with any math operation. I'm going to choose to use double negative because it tends to be faster and more efficient in calculating. Now I have to put parentheses around it because in the order of how Excel calculates formulas, comparative operators are way at the bottom. So we have to force that comparative operation to calculate before the double negative. But now when I F9, wow, look at that. I have a 1, all the way down to 8, 6, which is the last one. Now all I have to do is add the ones. Now I'm going to Control Z. And here's something crazy about array formulas. This is an array function. That means functions like frequency, linest, mode, dot, multiple. They all deliver multiple answers simultaneously and are defined as array functions. But if you take an array function inside an aggregate function, it will calculate perfectly without any special keystroke. That means it will not require Control-Shift-Enter. So I'm simply going to put it in the aggregate function sum. And that's our formula for counting unique numbers, in our case, with some adjusted start hour time. When I hit Enter, there it is, 7. Now, I mentioned that I wanted to show you two ways to do this. So I'm going to copy this in Edit Mode, Control-C, Escape. And right over here, I'm going to Control-V. And just for the moment, I'm going to get rid of all that. That was our little bit. Remember, if I F9, we have some numbers greater than 0, and then all the rest are 0. Now, I'm going to show you this alternative, and this will only work because we can't get any negative numbers. From our data set, we're never going to have any negative numbers. So Control-Z. Remember, there was positives and zeros there, so I can simply use the sign function. Now, the sign function will convert any positive number to 1, 0 to 0, and negative numbers to -1. So when I close parentheses in F9, there's the same array as greater than and our double negative. Now, I didn't time these, and I'm going to Control-Z. But as I see it, the sign function is doing one array operation. That means it's looking through that entire array and checking out whether each number is positive, 0, or negative. When we did greater than and double negative, that was two array operations. The greater than was 1. The double negative was 2. So I'm assuming without testing that this probably is more efficient. And it will work inside of the sum also. Control-Enter. There is a 7. Now, I'm going to put this back in edit mode because that whole little thing inside of the sum function, remember, that's delivering our ones and zeros. And we're going to use that pattern again. So I'm going to copy that and then hit Enter. Now, we're going to see two different formulas for extracting a unique list of dates. For this column, it's going to be the much more complicated formula. But we're going to assume that the data set might have missing dates in sequence, meaning 8.1, 8.2. Maybe there's no dates and times enter for 8.3. If we could assume that we're always going to get rain totals and dates for every single possible date in sequence, then later we'll see a much easier formula. All right, now I'm going to type in =, and then Control-V and hit F9. Now, this is our pattern for which dates to extract. That's going to be 7/31. This is going to be 8/1, and so on. But if we're going to use the index lookup function to look up the correct date and use this as the pattern of which dates to extract, we're actually going to have to get the position. This would be position 1, meaning please get the first date. This would be position 11. Please get the 11th date. Now, in order to convert this resultant array of ones and zeros to 1, 11, and all the relative positions, we're going to first have to generate all possible relative positions, which means this. I need an array that says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, all the way to whatever the last position is. So I'm going to Control Z. And just for a moment, I'm going to cut Control X. And now we're going to create the entire array of relative positions. Open parentheses, and we're going to use the row function. Now, the actual size of the date column is always going to come from the date stamp column. So I'm going to put that in there. Close parentheses. Now, notice, here's the row function. It will tell us what row a cell reference is. The fact that I gave it a whole column means we're doing a function argument array operation. So when I evaluate this, row will deliver every one of the rows for every cell in that range. So when I hit F9, there it is, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and so on. But those are not the relative positions. I need 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, all the way down to 259. So Control Z. All I have to do is subtract. And now I'm going to use row again, but I'm going to use row with a single cell. Now notice that is table formula nomenclature for the field name of that column. But right now, if I close parentheses, row is looking at, oh, row 1. Well, now that we have an array of 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, if we take 2, 3, 4, all the way to 260 and subtract 1, I'll get exactly the correct resultant array of relative positions. So now when I hit F9, I get 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way down to 259. Now guess what? We can filter this list with our other resultant array of ones and zeros. Control Z, and I'm going to do it with division. So divide symbol and then Control V. That whole sign there is filled with ones and zeros. Because it's in the denominator, the 1 will pick out the correct relative position, and the 0 will generate a divide by 0 error. F9 to evaluate that. Now let's come up and look in the formula bar. There's the 1. There's the 11. And if I look through, there's the 59, and so on. If I look down here, I can see there's a 107, a 155. Each one of those numbers represents the correct first occurrence of our serial number date. Now, how am I going to extract from that? And if I look back to the formula bar, in the first cell, as I copy the formula down, I need 1. Then when I copy the formula down to the second row, I need 11, meaning in this column here, I need the relative positions to be extracted as I copy the formula down. No problem. I can use the small function. Control Z. Now, instead of using small, I want to avoid having to use Control Shift Enter on this huge array formula. So I'm going to use the aggregate function, which has a small option built in. So I'm going to type AG, and watch this. When I hit Tab to accept this function here, it's going to steal that parentheses, Tab. Look at that. So I have to remember to type a parentheses, because that orange parentheses is part of the array calculation. Now, aggregate is amazing. It has exactly 19 functions. And functions 14 to 19 can handle array operations without Control-Shift-Enter. So I'm going to use small. That means I put a 15 into the first argument function number. So I'm going to double-click 15. Now watch this. Comma. Options. Remember, we have a bunch of divide by 0 errors, and we don't want our formula to be messed up by those divide by 0 errors. So I use option number 6. Ignore error values. So options is 6, comma. And then when I click on array, that's the magic argument that can handle this array operation without Control-Shift-Enter. Now, there's only 5 functions in Excel that have arguments that allow us to create an array formula without using Control-Shift-Enter. They are aggregate, index, chi-square, test, sum product, and lookup function. All right, now, comma, and we get to the k argument. Remember, we want small 15. We want the first smallest, second smallest, third smallest as we copy down. So in K, I need a formula number incrementer. That means a formula element that will give me the number 1, 2, 3, 4 as I copy down. So I use rows with an S, not row, but rows. Now I'm sitting in G5, so I type G $5 to lock the first 5, colon G5, close parentheses. The beauty of rows is it asks the question, how many rows are in this range? Well, right now, 5 to 5 row means 1 row. But because there's no $sign in front of this 5, when I copy it down, it will turn to 6, 7, 8, 9, and so on. Rows will count 1, then 2, then 3, then 4 in terms of total number of rows. So that will be, in the K argument, our formula number incrementer. Close parentheses, Control-Enter, apply the general format. And as I copy it down, you've got to be kidding me. Look at that, 111, 59, 107, and so on. Now, we'll deal with that error later. But that is beautiful. We have exactly what we need for index function to look up the right date, F2. Now, we're going to need the adjusted column, not this column over here. So inside of frequency, I'm going to click on data array argument in the screen tip to highlight everything there. Control-C. Remember, that has the integer list of the correct dates, including the time adjustment. Now I click before aggregate and type index function. Now index array, those are the items we want to potentially look up. So Control-V. Now I'm going to type a comma. And look at that. That whole aggregate in row number, that will deliver the correct row number or relative position in that array of the item to look up. Now I'm going to close parentheses. And one other thing. Remember, index is one of those functions that has an argument that can handle array operations without Control-Shift-Enter. And guess what? That subtraction on that whole column is an array operation. So far, we have an array formula that doesn't require Control-Shift-Enter. I simply Control-Enter, double-click, and send it down. Oh, it stopped 1. And I need a date and time. I don't see it here, so I Control-1. I'm going to go down to date and scroll down, and I think there's one that I want right there. Actually, let's use this one. We'll use military time. So it has the date and the time. Click OK. That is looking awesome. Now we need to adjust this in this column. Whatever number of hours here, I need the start time to be adjusted. So in the top cell, F2, and I'm simply going to add this time equivalent. That's table formula nomenclature. As we copy down, it will be locked. Control-Enter, double-click, and send it down. There is our unique list of dates being extracted. Now, I'd like to turn off the num errors. And what we want to avoid, F2 at the top, is that's a huge array formula. I do not want to use if error on this formula. Because notice that error all the way down to the bottom of the column is generated by the array formula. So if we use if error, it'll have to run the array formula in every cell in this column. So anytime you have an array formula that's extracting values, use the if function and an alternative logical test if one is available. And one is available. I can simply say if, and then I'm going to steal this rows. That's the number incrementer, Control-C. And in the logical test argument, I'm going to say, hey, number incrementer, that means 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As we copy down, when you get past or you are greater than our count of unique dates, F4 to lock it, comma. Then what do I want? Well, if you're past row 7, then you want to show nothing. So we're going to use double quote, double quote. That is a 0-length text string that will display nothing. Otherwise, comma, the entire formula should be run. The beauty of this is it runs the logical test in every cell. But in all cells past whatever row this count is, it will simply dump a 0-length text string instead of running the entire array formula. come to the end, close parentheses, Control Enter, double click and send it down. Now I want to copy the formula all the way down, so I'm going to, that's the last cell. I'm actually going to try to fill down. I'm going to use my scroll bar, and I found cell G464. Now I'm going to use Control-Shift-Up arrow. Now it only went to what looks like an empty cell, but the formula is in that cell. So now I can use Control-D to fill that formula down. Now the active cell is down at the bottom, so I'm going to hit F2 to put it in edit mode. And sure enough, it filled down. Enter. All right, now we have our entire column. Now we can do our total formula. Now let's test this actually. I want to see if this unique list will actually extract. I'm going to type a 0 here and Control Enter. Just like that, it's totally working. 10, Control Enter. 5, Control Enter. That is absolutely beautiful. Now that we have the start, date, and time, we can use the SUMIFS function and say, hey, please add everything from the rain total column that's greater than or equal to the lower and less than the upper. And the way we'll get the upper is we'll use this date time plus 1. All right, so you ready? SUMIFS. The sum range, I'm going to highlight using my black arrow to highlight the whole rain total column, comma. Criteria range, well, we're going to need the date column, so I highlight the whole date column. There's the criteria range 1, comma. Criteria 1. Well, we need to say in double quotes greater than or equal to n double quotes and join it using the join operator to the actual lower end. That means the start, date, and time. Now we comma to get to criteria range 2. I highlight the date column again. There's criteria range 2, comma. And now we want to, for criteria 2, in double quotes, less than, not an equal sign, n double quotes, and join it to, wait a second, that's the lower end, but if we add 1, that gets me all the way to 5 a.m. the next day. Now notice we do not want to include 5 a.m. in both places, meaning down in the next row and here. So that's why we do not have an equal sign there. Now close parentheses, Control Enter, double click and send it down. That is beautiful. Now let's test this. I'm going to put 0 and Control Enter. There, everything is updating. 10, absolutely beautiful. That is really the advantage of formulas. The dates and the sum totals are totally updating. Now I want to turn this off when it gets past a row where there's a double quote, double quote. So I'm going to come up to the top, F2, and say, if this relative cell reference is equal to double quote, then for value of true, please show double quote. Otherwise, run your formula. Whoops, Control Z. Otherwise, run your formula. Close parentheses, Control Enter. Double click and send it down. All right, let's test our reporting system. 0, Control Enter. Everything is updating. 5, Control Enter. That is beautiful. Now we mentioned that this formula right here would work no matter if we're missing dates over here. But if we're not ever going to miss dates, there is an alternative formula that is a lot easier. If we can assume that we're always going to have a sequential list of dates with no missing dates, then in essence we can try and get the min date, and then for subsequent rows simply add 1. And when we get past this many rows here, we can turn the formula off. Now for the min part of this, I'm going to come up here and steal this inside a frequency data array. That's the adjusted column, and I want to look through that list of integer dates and get the min, Control-C, escape. Now this is an array calculation. I could put it in the min function, but the min function would require Control-Shift-Enter, so I'm going to use aggregate. Now we can't use min because functions 1 to 13 do not handle array operations. It's only 13 to 19, but of course I have small. So I'm going to use 15, comma. And we don't have to ignore anything here, so I can use 4, comma, and I'm going to Control V. Now, the trick is comma. And the K, since we're using min and always going to use min, I simply type in 1. Close parentheses, Control Enter, and there is the correct min. Now, I want to show you something. A guy named Jay Cook sent in a cool solution, and he worked off similar logic that I'm working off. He did the min here, and then he did a cool formula here to, in essence, add 1 as it copies down and then turn off when it gets past the max. And then he did SUMIFS, which is similar to the formula I did, except for he added the time increment inside the criteria. So if you look right there, that's adding it, whereas I had added the starting time to each one of the dates in the cell. But that's a pretty cool solution. Now, I'm going to do something slightly different. I always worry when I have more than one formula in a column. It's not that we always want to avoid that, but I'm going to try and avoid that here. Now, how would I do that? Because really, once I get the min, all I need to do is add 1 from above. And actually, I need to very carefully add the time increment here also. So I'm going to click that. So I could just add 1 all the way down and turn it off when I get past the right row. But I want a single formula. Well, the only time we're actually going to need this, only one time, is when the row equals 1. So I'm going to say if, and then use our formula incrementer. I'm in E5, so I'm going to say $5 colon E5. When you are equal to 1, then please use that. Otherwise, now I have 2 remaining conditions. I have to do the 1 above plus 1 to increment these dates. And I have to turn it off when I get to past row 7. So I'm going to do that one here. If I am, and I'm going to use this number incrementer again, if rows is greater than 7, F4, comma. Now notice I'm in the second if. The value is true, meaning I'm past row 7 is double quote, double quote. Otherwise, the only condition left is please look at the one above, plus 1. Now I'm going to close parentheses, because there's 2 ifs. And that will be my formula. Control Enter, arrow, arrow, Control down arrow. Oops, I see I have to fix something here. It didn't copy down all the way. So I did Control down, and now I'm going to arrow, arrow, Control Shift up arrow, and now I'm going to Control D to fill down. I could have dragged it down or used the scroll arrow or something, but that's a different way. Now, right now, both of these will yield exactly the same thing. But if I were to come over here, and let's see, let's delete all the 8 2s. Luckily, there's Control Z. Right-click Delete, and since it's a table, I say Delete Table Rows. Now, if I come up here, right now, they're all working. But if I change the increment to 0, now it says 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but now this is the proper actual list. 1, 3, 4, 5, 6. And so if you can safely assume that you're always going to get every single date, that formula is much easier. I mean, the entire column really is doing plus 1, and it only does this aggregate thing in the very first row. Otherwise, that is a crazy, huge formula. Now I'm going to Control Z on that and Control Z on the delete, so I can leave that there. Control Home. Now I actually want to change something in this formula right here, F2. And here's what I want to change. Notice I checked to see if row is equal to 1, and then I ran this formula. Well, guess what? Because I've ordered the logical tests and the if functions from left to right, that means that logical test has to run in every single cell all the way down. And I don't really want that, because it's the second logical test that I need to run in every single cell. So if I highlight if, the logical test, the value if true, all the way to the comma right there, and Control X. Now, the logical test that's run first and will be run in every single cell as I copy down is, hey, is the number incrementer greater than the number of unique dates, which is the logical test that has to run in each cell. If that's true, then please put double quote, double quote. Otherwise, value if false, right there the cursor is flashing. I'm going to Control V. Otherwise, please run this second if, which now will be allowed to check if rows is equal to 1, which will be the case for this one row. Then dump the min value. Otherwise, please do one cell above plus 1. Now, it probably doesn't make that much of a difference, but it is more efficient than the way I had it organized before. Control Enter, double click and send it down, and it will give us exactly the same result. And that is a wild reporting solution. We are definitely going to come over here, highlight the top two cells, Control Shift down arrow, Control C, Control Home, Control down arrow, down arrow. And because I'm exactly one row below, I'm going to Control V. And now I've added new records to the Excel table. That's the whole reason that we use the Excel table feature, because anything pointing at these table columns will automatically update. And sure enough, we can see there's 74 rows, and there is our report, totally instantly updating. If I change this to 0 and Control Enter, everything updates. 10, Control Enter, everything updates. All right, that was a lot of fun with some crazy array formulas. There's a real crazy one. A SUMIFS with an upper and lower limit, and counting unique numbers. Now, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up and leave a comment. And sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun. All right, we'll see you next video.